Reg is hovering at my elbow, making that noise again. A soft keening that makes me want to slap him. What? I snap and then feel guilty when I see the hurt in his eyes. He doesn't answer, of course. He can't. He has no tongue. His eyes are roomy and watering, and he looks at me with that helpless animal face. He is helpless, though, isn't he? What chance does he have? If it wasn't for me, he'd be dead already. Jonus wants to put him out of his misery. He's a burden, Trish. Surely you can see that, he'd said to me, not even 2 months post-takeover. We'd been holed up in a shabby hut on the outskirts of what was once our town, waiting for the invaders to either die or go back to whatever planet it was they came from. But 2.5 years in, and they hadn't died or returned to their home planet, the bastards. Yes, but he's a human burden, Jonus. There's not many of us left as it is. We can't turn on each other. I'd been sluicing out the wound on his leg and he screamed like a wuss as I picked at the infected tissue with tweezers. It wasn't healing and looked nasty, and oh boy, did it smell. I gagged and said nothing to him about the greeny fluorescence glistening at the edges. Jonus didn't know it, but he was infected. And the truth was, it was Jonus who would need to be put out of his misery. When I'd doused the wound with salt and waited for the torrent of expletives to subside, I bandaged the leg and handed in the last of the paracetamol. Covertly, I made a small notch on the wood. Day 1. I'd have to try and keep track of the change. A week later, we'd moved into an old farmhouse with a couple, Tom and Janice. We'd come across them scavenging, as we were for supplies in the nearest town. We guessed it was November or December, and I was hoping to find some clothing or blankets to help with the cold in our hut. They looked sympathetically at Reg as he shuffled up and down the aisle, unfocused and fragile, wearing the plimsolls we'd found that were a size too big, and a cap perched on his head with "Look on the bright side" emblazoned across the peak. Janice eyed the bandage on Jonas's leg as he limped around the pharmacy in his shorts looking for paracetamol and a toothbrush. There were hushed whisperings between the two of them, glancing in our direction, before they invited us to go with them, offering hot stew of no specific content and paracetamol for Jonus. Well, 2 weeks later, they were gone. Captured by the invaders on a supply scavenge gone wrong and eaten on the spot. We found a few remnants of them. Reg picked up a couple of Tom's fingers, and I turned my eyes away from Janice's ear, still with the gold stud earring, and one of her eyes staring at me with indignation that the bastards had had the bare-faced cheek to catch and consume her. As generous as she was, she had been a bit of a know-it-all with a misplaced confidence in her survival skills. Reg had kept one of Tom's fingers as a souvenir until it started to smell, and we lobbed it into the pond at the back of the farmhouse while he was asleep. He cried the next morning when he couldn't find it. Don't judge him. He had become very attached to Tom in the 2 weeks we'd spent with them. So, here we are. I'm trying to calculate how long it has been since Jonus showed signs of infection. 3 weeks? 4? He's lost a couple of teeth, and I found a fingernail in the bathroom sink this morning. He hasn't said anything, but he must know now. I mean, we're all aware of the symptoms and signs. I noticed the beginnings of growth on the back of his neck this morning, when he stripped to the waist to chop wood. Blistery welts with that greeny tinge beneath the surface. Pus will be brewing. You can't treat them. Nothing works. He caught me looking and turned his body, reaching for his shirt. And later that evening, when Reg was asleep on his mattress, still wearing his cap, snoring softly and dribbling from the corner of his mouth, I said, "We need to talk about it." "I just need to know you'll do the right thing for me, Trish," he said, not making eye contact, his face neutral. I could see the sheen across his forehead in the candlelight. The fever was starting. "Promise me." "I don't know that I can, Jonus. Can't you do it yourself?" "No, I don't think so," he said. His dark, long hair was pulled back into a ponytail. I could see how thin it had become during the last couple of weeks. He was only 38. I had thought him so good-looking when I met him. It had been 2 weeks after the invasion. He stood amid the chaos like an oasis of calm, a beacon of rescue, as the rest of us ran and screamed and panicked, running in circles and being picked off one by the invaders who munched and crunched their way through the entire town before moving on to the next. He'd held out a hand to me when I'd been knocked to the ground. "Come with me," he'd said. The shell of that man remained before me. Lips pulled tight, fear flickering behind those eyes, and I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Have you thought of how to do it?" I asked him. "We've a gun, but no bullets," he said. "What about the pond? We could weight you down. It's deep enough." "Yeah, that's an option, I suppose." He turned to me and asked, "How long do I have, do you think?" "About a month," I said, and he nodded and put the kettle on the fire to make tea. In the morning he was gone. I searched for him, but to no avail. Reg cried and pined for him, and I did my best to comfort the old man. "He'll come back," I whispered. 3 weeks later, I woke in the night to find the room bathed in a green light. I shot out of bed and raced along the landing to Reg's room. Violently, I shook him awake. "Reg, we have to move, now!" I gripped his arm and yanked him off the mattress. He was too slow. He couldn't move quickly, and he wasn't yet on his feet. He looked bewildered, and he made noises at me. "They're here, Reg, the invaders. They're outside. Move!" He managed to get to his feet, and I pushed him ahead of me to the stairs. The green glow lit the downstairs like some hideous Halloween film set. And just at that moment, as Reg went too slowly down the stairs in front of me, I caught sight of the blister on the back of his neck. It was huge, filled with pus and pulsated greenly. "You need to move quicker, Reg," I urged, pushing him slightly. And then the door was burst open. An invader entered, large and looming, green and glistening. The tentacles whipped forward, seized Reg around the middle and pulled him outside. I ran down the stairs and stopped in the doorway. Reg was held aloft momentarily, surprise and shock on his face. Briefly he caught my eye. He smiled gently and gave me a little wave. And then his head was ripped from his body and cast to the ground as he was devoured limb by limb. I took the opportunity to get to the cellar and waited, and waited, and waited. I emerged cautiously some 2 or 3 hours later. The green glow had gone, a sure sign the invader had departed. Outside, Reg's head lay on the ground, still wearing his cap. "Look on the bright side. Oh, Reg." His eyes were still intact, and they stared roundly at me in shock and horror, his mouth agape. And I wondered again, what had happened to his tongue? We had never found the answer to that particular little mystery. I knelt on the ground next to Reg and closed his eyes. It was then I noticed the welt on the back of my arm and the barest trace of a fluorescent green tinge around the edges. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I became aware of a presence in my room. I couldn't see much in the darkness, but there was the sound of laboured breathing, raspy and painful. I lay still and cast my eyes as far as I could, scanning the gloom. A noise came from behind me. Slowly, I turned. A shadowy shape in the corner. A movement. "What do you want?" I asked. "I have food. Are you hungry?" The figure remained silent, just breathing that ghastly, ragged breath. I got out of bed, reached for the matches and lit the candle. I knew then who it was. "I told you he would come home, Reg," I whispered. "Jonus." "Come with me, Jonus," I said, reaching out my hand. This time I would be his rescue. His face was covered, but I could see the blistered, infected, open wound on his arm that reached for me. The smell was overpowering. Greeny yellow slime oozed from his body and dripped to the floor. "Come with me to the pond." At the pond, I threaded 2 carrier bags by the handles onto 2 pieces of rope and tied them around our waists. I filled them with rocks. I reached for his hand, and together we walked into the pond.